Guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with the Green Scorpion. Today, we're here with the top 10 video game witches. It's the last of the monster month, I think. I don't know for sure. It's been a while. So yeah, basically the ones that do spellcasting. Got spellcasters again, so let's see who's the top video game witch. We got Gruntilda from Banjo-Kazooie, Bayonetta from, Bayonetta. I'm actually kind of curious to see who wins this one. So, shall we check it out? Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go. Here we go. I wonder what's going to count as a witch. It's pretty much a lot of interpretations.
Hello guys and ghouls and non-binary fools, the Green Scorpion here, and it is time to close the book on this hallowed time of the year. While I understand I'm a month overdue on this monster business, it's no excuse for me not to deliver you all a nightmare before Christmas. There are so many monsters that I could have chosen and many I've had to refuse. It's a monster mainstay, so let's take it away, and at last pay the witches their dues. Most cultures in history have something akin, a mage of a female persuasion, those counter to culture who lean into nature and maybe hexes on occasion. You know the tropes, the hat, the cat, and the cackling while riding on their broom. And while some steal children or curse the deserving, they're not always bringers of doom. Like, don't get me wrong, be cautious around them. They're not always brimming with virtue. But in myths, pagan and Celtic, they'd sometimes sooner help you than hurt you. They're more antisocial than evil, lonely, studying the dark arts. But all around the world, we warned our children, avoid them if you've any smarts. They weren't a true concern to the world until Heinrich Kramer wrote in 1487 the Malleus Maleficarum Treatise, which branded witches enemies of heaven. Made famous through all of Europe by the Roman Catholic Church, now the witch hunts had truly begun, with everyone subject to search. That's why for years, when you heard of a witch, they usually acted as a villain. But read it sometime and it's plain to see, Heinrich just really hated women. But witchcraft remains alive today.
Yeah, that does sound about right.
Best criticism. Though not always supernatural, more so for many a form of self-expressionism. Like, yeah, if I saw a witch of the West on the street, I would probably bolt. But I have friends who consider themselves witchy for hobbies that border on the occult. Astrology, botany, mineralogy, seances, and horoscopes. And in video games,
if it ain't mainstream media or mainstream religion,
these tropes.
Usually counts as witchcraft.
Depiction of witches who work with some type of satanic connection, the high fantasy witches who cast magic spells oft of the darker or greener direction, and fairy tale witches with broomsticks and all stealing children to stock their shelves. But in truth, there are just as many ways to be a witch as there are witches themselves. But those tropes overlap and combine at times, and it can be real hard to know which witch is which. But the important thing is that they improve our games, be they on PC, PlayStation, or Switch. So let's double our bubbles, toil our troubles, and prepare to be hexed, bitches. I'm the Green Scorpion, and tonight I present my top 10 video game witches.
Here we go. Let's see which favorite. First up.
You guys know I haven't played every single video game out there, right? I understand it's disappointing when your favorite doesn't get included, but even if I research everything I can on my own, it's impossible to familiarize myself with everything. The only games I played rule was made to protect my own sanity from the entire vacuous space of this medium. Though occasionally I do go out of my way to play a game that someone tells me is perfect for a list I'm planning. In this case, I was advised by Comic Foil and his wife Allie,
Night in the Woods,
claim witch by the way, to try out this indie game called Witchwood. Witchwood is an indie title about, well, a witch from the woods, who finds herself tasked to wake a sleeping maiden at the behest of a talking goat. Already we're getting a lot of witchisms here. I love the witch's design, which looks like it was cobbled together from things in a witch's pantry. Her head is helmeted with an upside-down cauldron with slits for 4 eyes. She's got some Ren Fair looking clothes and little bird feet, which kind of reminds me of Baba Yaga from Slavic folklore and her house that travels on chicken legs. The maiden evokes Sleeping Beauty or Snow White, who were put to sleep by a witch, so it's kind of a twist that you're the one trying to wake her up. And the whole talking to goats thing is a supposed way to identify a witch in the Maleficarum. Like the goat that they were talking to would actually be the devil in disguise or something. I don't know.
Okay, sorry I'm pausing early, but if you guys remember the witch, that old movie, or is it considered old? But yeah, basically, Black Phillip. Yeah, you can definitely see where that's coming from. You gotta be careful with that goat. Pretty sure I would be too, but oh boy, careful who you trust, cause they might do that.
No, that book is dumb. And while we never see what's underneath the cauldron, the witch is giving off some old lady vibes. She refers to everyone as young pests and seems generally annoyed that she has to help people to further her own goals. She'd rather be
long
a
lives.
Swamp,
Everyone
but
would be
also
kind
enjoys
of
the
young.
chance to screw over some wealthy assholes abusing their power. So to break the sleeping spell, the witch needs to perform a secret retribution on the 12 societal monsters who have wronged her, depicted here as anthropomorphic animals like the rat, the wolf, etc., giving the story a real fairy tale feel. But how do you deliver this comeuppance? Through crafting. Lots and lots of crafting. Littered throughout the world are dozens of creatures and components, and with her witch's eye, the witch can immediately identify what spell or reagent is needed to deal with any given foe, and in her spellbook she can quickly reference the ingredients of that spell or reagent. It's not so much a puzzle because the answer is already given. Rather, it's about gathering what you need in whatever way feels right to you. Here's a standard example. So in the quest The Stag, you need to get some information from a bunch of snooty nobles that don't want to talk to you. So clearly you need some truth serums. A truth serum is made from mixing unveiling powder, a crow's foot, and 3 chilled mushrooms. Okay, well the mushrooms are easy, just take the hatchet and break apart some logs in the snowy region until you find some. Easy. The crow's foot is quite literal, you have to catch an actual crow. And for that, you need a snap trap, which has its own recipe. So the snap trap is made from mixing impi nuts found in the forest and wickerworks, which is another recipe. And that's made from reedy twine and twigs, which can also be found in the forest. So collect all those, make the traps, catch the crows, get the crow's feet, 2 down, 1 to go. So what's unveiling powder? Well, for that, you need to mix hag shrooms and seeker vines, both found in the swamp, with more impi nuts. Damn it, knew I should have grabbed extra. And then finally you have all 3 ingredients so you can make a truth serum, but you need 3 truth serums. So repeat this process twice and you can finally get back on track. So yeah, all this might sound frustrating, but a lot of what witchcraft is constantly realizing that you're out of something and having to run to the store again. And besides, you're doing this quest at the same time as other quests, so you're always multitasking on your grocery shopping. And for some cozy game lovers, this can be very meditative. And it's also extremely cathartic to see these horrible people get their just desserts from what to them seems to come out of nowhere. But for you, it's the result of hours of planning. After researching all of my entries today, I came up with 3 qualities that separate witchcraft from other forms of magic or spiritualism. And the first one is intention. What the witch is doing in Witchwood, and what many supposed witches in the past were doing, is often more chemistry or cooking than unexplainable sorcery. Heck, one of the things that you can make in this game is bread. But what elevates a witch's spell is the intention that the witch puts into it. Something emphasized in every witchy instruction book. These things don't work just because you put the right ingredients into a pot. They work because you wanted something enough to put your intention into it, and that you cared enough to scour the woods for the right sized twigs to make your spell work. In the end, the secret ingredient to every formula is a witch's hard work, and this game exemplifies this in a repetitive but rewarding way that is sure to make you smirk. I'd say the Witchwood Witch is a pretty strong start to our list, though let the record show that I did not finish this game. But you get the gist.
Fair.
Here's a question I expect to come up. Does a character have to be a woman to count as a witch? For the sake of this list,
that'd be more of a warlock, but
witchcraft certainly has a history with women. Much of its iconography is rooted in femininity, and in some stories it is exclusive to women, but it's not a hard rule in all fictional universes, or our own for that matter. Witch spaces I've seen are actually very welcoming to male and non-binary members, and depending on the outlook or a story's rules, there might be another name for non-female witches. In Harry Potter, wizards are just the male counterpart to witches. The Sabrina series does the same thing with the term warlock, whereas the Owl House decides witch is a gender-neutral term. all of this is to say that we have exactly one male character on this list. And while the actual word witch doesn't come up too often to describe him, he's an overlooked character who really deserves the credit. Kamek,
Kamek,
from the Mario series. The continuity of Mario characters is funny sometimes.
Yeah, true. He would be kind of a wizard.
Kamek is a Magikoopa, a teleporting, spell-flinging enemy introduced in Super Mario World. Yoshi's Island then introduces a specific Magikoopa by the name of Kamek, who rides a broom and kidnaps children. Two very traditional witch pastimes. Kamek is the caretaker to an adolescent Bowser, and he has since remained a mainstay for future Yoshi games, and in the main Mario series, often appears as a head crony for Bowser. It's a little confusing because without his broom, there's nothing really to distinguish Kamek from the other Magikoopas, and it's even more confusing when you realize that in Japanese, all of the Magikoopas are called Kameka, Kamek's Japanese name. I think we have a Yoshi situation here, where there are a ton of Yoshis, but one of them is the Yoshi, and Bowser has a platoon of Kameks, but one of them is the Kamek. And Kamek's not even the only head honcho Magikoopa that we've seen. The first two Paper Marios had Kami Koopa, who even more resembles a classic witch before she was presumably left at a retirement home never to be seen again. And Super Mario Galaxy gave us the boss Kamala. Though I still think that this one Magikoopa that blasts Mario off the bridge in the intro is supposed to be the Kamek.
Probably,
It's a mess, but the current story seems to be that Kamek is the head Magikoopa that has been Bowser's assistant since the Big Lug was born. You could also say that Kamek leans more into the castle wizard tropes, like the Merlin type. Plenty of wizards have pointy hats and magic staffs too. But I prefer to think that Kamek combines these two tropes because, again, he flies on a broom and kidnaps children with the help of his toadies. Yeah, these guys in red are called toadies, as if we didn't already have an entire race called toads. This is why we'll never have a stable Mario continuity. This does, however, bring me to the second theme that I want to establish with witches: coalition. A lot of modern witchdom is based around working together in a coven of sorts. I think Kamek's coven is the other Magikoopas that he trains, not to mention Bowser and his family. Think about it. Bowser uses a lot of magic throughout the series. It's fair to assume that he learned it from Kamek. Likewise, the Koopalings have used magic scepters with Kamek-ish magic in the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and likely Bowser Jr. will eventually be trained in the magic arts as well. We can already see in Origami King that Kamek's role of caretaker has continued on to Bowser's son. A lot of times, Kamek's magic is supportive in nature. Throughout Yoshi's Island, all of the boss fights are started when Kamek buffs another enemy, making them grow or become more powerful. The one exception being when Kamek shrinks Yoshi down for a frog to eat him, which is a fun curveball, or those occasions when Kamek needs to fight alone. The usual MO for these battles is Kamek firing his patented square, circle, triangle spells. Sorry Sony, Kamek was doing it first. And if these blasts don't hit Mario or Yoshi, they'll usually hit a block, transforming it into a Goomba or Thwomp or some other enemy. And then we have Mario and Luigi Dream Team, which might be the best showcase of Kamek's power yet, multiplying himself into multicolor clones with different functions, one of which is a really annoying healer.
Oh, the white
Granted, this fight is in the dream world, so Kamek might be drawing upon some dream logic to be this powerful, but either way, I love this fight because it feels like Kamek's chance to finally let loose after all the crap that he has to put up with all this time. He's one of the best sidekicks in Origami King, but spends all of his screen time worrying about Bowser Jr. until he basically sacrifices himself with a multi-shadow clone jutsu to let Mario continue on to aid Bowser. He was originally planned to be playable in Mario Kart 64, but then was cut and didn't get introduced into the series proper until the DLC of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Bowser's constantly putting him down and threatening him, but keep a close eye and you'll catch these little moments of mutual respect between the two. Kamek works hard and doesn't ask for much, and appeasing Bowser has to take tactics and a light touch. But his contributions to the Koopa army are no mystery. He's the linchpin of the most omnipresent villainous force in video game history.
He ain't wrong there.
Get ready for a power spike.
I seem to bring up the death battle,
can work miracles with prep time, and Kamek can turn baby Bowser into a giant. But in Final Fantasy VIII, we have a witch crushing time and space into a single point. I can't really wrap my head around how strong that is. It's literally on a higher dimension.
Sounds
so
right.
Final Fantasy VIII is not my favorite story in the series. I don't think it explores its themes as coherently as its bordering Final Fantasy games. But here's what you need to know. In the world of Final Fantasy VIII, there are people called sorceresses, women, and exclusively women, who can tap into the power of the creator god and use magic more powerfully and more easily than anyone else. And although they call it something different, the dark outfits these women tend to wear scream witch. When a sorceress dies, she must pass her powers onto another woman, or else she ends up as a miserable ghost. So it's kind of a compulsory form of coalition, always making sure that your power is passed on to the next generation. But one sorceress flips this concept on its head, the main villain Ultimecia. And damn, that's a nice look. Neckline? What neckline? And for the record, I'm neither sexualizing nor insulting her. I'm too afraid that she'd gore me with one of those hair horns of hers. What we're seeing here with this design is a sort of side path off the main thoroughfare of fairy tale witches, the anime femme fatale witch, clad in spikes and conspicuously gapped tops, the category of Queen Beryl and Rita Repulsa. And I believe the name Ultimecia is a play on Artemisia, the queen of Halicarnassus who fought alongside Xerxes in the Second Persian invasion of Greece around 480 BC. A pretty badass woman by historical account who advised Xerxes against sending a fleet to Salamis but nonetheless served in that battle herself, outperforming all the male generals who wanted that battle in the first place. And this connection seems particularly likely because Ultimecia has a lot in common with a boss from Final Fantasy V named Halicarnassus. Neat! And of course her name refers to ultimate, meaning last or final, as Ultimecia is from the distant future, the end of time as it turns out, where she'll have no one left to pass her powers on to. So instead, she sends her consciousness back in time, possessing a series of sorceresses with the eventual goal of reaching the beginning of time and casting a spell that squishes the timeline together like an accordion. In typical Final Fantasy fashion, we don't immediately know that Ultimecia is doing this, or that she even exists, until deeper in the game where she turns out to be the secret villain behind the secret villain. And yeah, Ultimecia is extremely powerful, less into potions and brews, but more as an active spellcaster. In her boss fight, she has this annoying gimmick where she chooses the 3 party members that she'll fight, the others being tossed out of the battle, so you're gonna need everyone equipped and ready. She'll also cast Maelstroms to curse everyone and reduce their HP to 1/3 of their maximum. She can enchant herself to double cast all of her spells, and will immediately dismiss your summoned guardian forces, the otherworldly beings that other people use to access their magic. Worse yet, she'll summon her own girlfriend out of her opponent's nightmares, the diabolical Griever, and combine it with her final form using the junctioning system. This is the same mechanic that you've been using throughout the game, but when she does it, it reminds me that it's essentially summoning and combining with demons, which is the thing the Catholic Church was so afraid that witches were doing. Which brings me to the third major theme of witch media, persecution. In most settings, witches are seen as evil by the populace, sometimes rightfully, sometimes unrightfully. So a lot of witch characters come from a place of fighting that oppression. The heroic version of this is gaining power to protect their kind. The villain version, Ultimecia's version, is mass retribution. Across Final Fantasy VIII's massive lore, there have been many sorceresses, both good and evil. There's Adele, a sorceress who took over her continent, and was so feared by the world that she had to be trapped in a giant Pandora's box. On the other hand, there was a sorceress that, though we never learn her name, was so beloved by the people that she had a movie made about her. A movie Laguna stars in at one point in her flashbacks. So society's view on sorceresses has probably had its ups and downs, but seeing as there's now a government military academy dedicated to defending against witches, plus some of the things that Ultimecia says later, it's safe to say that a big part of her motivation was seeing history's treatment of people like her. This scene is a little confusing because the sorceress we're seeing is actually another character named Adea, but Ultimecia is controlling her at this point. These words are hers, and likely so is that outfit. As Adea, Ultimecia manages to charm herself into being the appointed ambassador of Galbadia, and in her best villainous scene, makes a speech to a bewitched crowd, chastising them for appointing the kind of person that they've been persecuting for all of history, and then unalives their leader to massive cheers. Damn! For real, this scene shook me on rewatch. Like, this is certainly a terrible thing to do, but it feels weirdly topical now. Let me make this clear, I am not congratulating this, it's just a very powerful scene. And in terms of power scaling, Ultimecia is one of the strongest witches on this list. She's a cosmic level threat. And she's also the culmination of a ton of great lore that I think has a lot of interesting things to say about how society historically treats a belief system that it doesn't really understand, alternating between patronizing and subjugating the sorceresses for the things that they might do. When I look at this story that way,
that does sound about right.
Is a tragic figure. having no descendants to pass on her wisdom to, and instead trying to work her way backwards. Not just rewriting the history of oppression, but also making history impossible to occur. There is a lot to chew on here. So if Ultimecia is this powerful and influential, why is she so low? Well, because Final Fantasy VIII is weird. You hardly ever see Ultimecia outside of her proxy, and because of that, I'm not even sure how much of her motivation is really in the story. I'm running on a lot of conjecture here. And like I said, Final Fantasy VIII is not that good at explaining its themes, and Ultimecia's plot is wrapped up in so many other confusing characters and plot threads, not so much weaved as knotted together. There are a ton of fan theories that attempt to make Ultimecia more interesting, like maybe she's Rinoa from the future, but the writers repeatedly shoot down these theories.
Well,
I do like how Ultimecia works as a kind of dark mirror to Rinoa with a reverse color palette, and a dark mirror to the succession of witches, stealing from the young while she moves backwards through time. But that's just it. She's a mirror, and without anything in front of that mirror, there's nothing there. So while convoluted game plots are hardly a rarity, Ultimecia's story is just begging for clarity. But while confusing in concept, she is sharp as a dagger. If you can't make much sense, well, you can at least have swagger.
Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if they actually try to do her better in a remake. Or at least not a remastered, but remake. You know, kind of like with Final Fantasy VII. Would be surprised they actually did that. I don't know if they... Did they? Hang on. I think it was just a remaster, right? I'm sorry, I'm just looking this up because I know there was like a recent, Final Fantasy VIII thing. I can't remember if they labeled it as a remaster, remake. What's going on there? Nope, just remastered. Honestly, probably better would have been just, like, remake, but, Or at least change up the story. How would you guys do it, you know? Let me know. Anywho, back to the list.
So, I think there are going to be two camps here. The first camp will be amazed
there's
that
Gruntilda.
Gruntilda is so low. They'll have expected her to be in the top 3 at least. Now, what can I say? I know
I mean, she is iconic,
The
but...
second camp is going to be gobsmacked that I could rank a comparatively cartoonish crone over the woman that compressed time into a single point. Well, again, it comes back to Ultimecia's unexplored character motivations. Witchcraft is all about intention, and I know everything that Gruntilda intends. All the whats and the whys. She's an open spellbook, and that makes for a way more compelling character.
True.
But let's not assume that you all grew up with
Kazooie
and explained this loathsome lady. In a story beat right out of Snow White, Gruntilda asks her magic reflective surface, who's the fairest of them all? The Talking Cauldron says, not Gruntilda, and instead chooses Banjo's little sister, Tootie. And rather than reporting her cauldron to the FBI, Gruntilda kidnaps the bear cub and plans to magically siphon her beauty, which we see in the game over screen resulting in Hot Grunty. Funny thing is that Gruntilda really thought she had a shot at being the fairest before this exchange. The world may think she's ugly, but Gruntilda thinks she's beautiful, living in a tower shaped like her own face surrounded by grunty decor. I almost envy that
sounds
level of
right for
self-confidence. She's a real nasty goblin of a lady too. There's a whole side objective in learning all of Gruntilda's disgusting habits, which become topics on her deadly game show. It makes sense in context. These habits are randomized on every playthrough so they're harder to guess, but in every timeline, Gruntilda's freaking gross. A lot of Grunty's gruntisms are classic fairy tale
Probably
witch
if I'm playing that, I'm writing down what I know.
The Wicked Witch of the West as portrayed by Margaret Hamilton. While witches long predated 1939, I think the Wizard of Oz movie really cemented what a typical witch would look like for modern audiences. Crooked nose, pointy chin, pointier hat, black cloak, striped socks, and green warty skin. Even more so than the L. Frank Baum book that it was based off, actually. In the original text, the witch was never referred to as green. That's likely in addition to the movies to show off their cutting-edge Technicolor. The same reason that the Silver Slippers became the Ruby Slippers, and the Emerald City was actually Emerald instead of just being a ploy by the sham wizard. Sorry, my co-writer really loves The Wizard of Oz.
Fair.
Also like in The Wizard of Oz, Gruntilda has 3 sisters. One who takes after the movie's Glinda the Good Witch, but still green, and 2 more in the sequel who join Grunty in her kooky coven, also green. She also rides a broom, though it's decidedly more anthropomorphic, and has a similar attack style of throwing fire around. With excellent aim, I might add, she actually leads her shots. But her parallels aren't all Ozian. Gruntilda also takes a lot of cues from the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, particularly her speaking in rhyme. Throughout the entire
Yeah,
game, she
true.
trash talks you in Limerick, no matter what you're doing. And the funny thing is, this isn't even compulsory. She stops doing this in the sequel, implying that she was just screwing around with it in the first game. Hell, it inspired me to go all Macbeth in the video's intro. Where Gruntilda starts to buck the trends, however, is in her use of technology. She's a downright mad scientist at times, complete with hunchback lab assistant. Granted, not every witch has to be all about nature, but Gruntilda's a full-blown industrialist, with ownership of Rusty Bucket Bay and Grunty Industries. I guess the rampant pollution of these two adds to her love of the disgusting. She's not above driving a tank into battle either in Banjo-Tooie, and her tech savviness comes in handy in Nuts and Bolts when she has to make vehicles. This is also the game that gives Grunty a talking cat to replace her more canine-like broom that Banjo freaking murders in the first game.
Oops.
And as I'm sure you've noticed, Gruntilda takes on a few different looks over the years. I guess she's functionally immortal, but her body still takes battle damage, becoming a skeleton of her former self after the first game, and then being reduced to a head after the second, which then gets put into a robo-suit. To quote the legendary Debbie Reynolds in the cinematic masterpiece Halloween Town, magic is very simple. All you gotta do is want something, and then let yourself have it. Magic is foremost intent, after all, even if you cause conflict or strife, and Gruntilda's unearned sense of entitlement keeps her just clinging on to life. She may be a joke, but jokes can do damage, and Grunty's the worst of the worst. The best kind of villain that you want to take down with that bird you have stuffed in your purse.
True. I wonder if we'll ever get another Banjo game. Hopefully not following that game.
While stealing beauty is a wiggly witchy goal, I'll be raising the stakes over the next few entries, though our number 6 may feel more grounded after the Mad Monster Mistress. Baldur's Gate 3 is giving us a lot to work with this month, and in the hollow of the Emerald Grove, we can find Auntie Ethel, a kind elderly potion seller. At least, she seems kind at first. Clearly she's a witch, she's living out in the middle of nowhere making potions, but we also start to hear about missing children in the area. You can either gaslight this clearly desperate woman, or raise suspicions against Ethel to reveal that she isn't just a witch, she's a hag. Now, the word hag in English usually refers to a yucky old lady, but it's also used to refer to a particularly foul witch, usually one who chooses solitude over the company of a coven. In Dungeons & Dragons, which Baldur's Gate is based on, there's no selectable witch class. There are some versions like Pathfinder where it's available, just not here. Hags, however, are a separate race of monsters. Their strange powers attributed to their relationship to the Fae. Basically, it's D&D's way of taking the witches of fairy tales and elevating them to a high fantasy setting. Ethel, for example, shares aspects with the witch of Hansel and Gretel. She hides behind a sweet facade, inviting a young girl to her home, and convinces her to eat and eat and eat with the eventual goal of eating the girl herself. And to take it a step further, Ethel's eating a child is her process of turning that child into a new hag. That's one way to establish a coalition, I guess.
And there you go.
So like with the fairy tale witches, Ethel's witchery is a dark inversion of motherhood. As per D&D lore, hags have no real motherly instincts. They'll feign a protective maternal relationship, which is why Ethel insists that you call her auntie, and they'll physically breed offspring, but won't take any role in actually raising the new hag, simply setting it loose to wreak more havoc on unsuspecting forest travelers. You can view the proliferation of these witch tropes in ancient times as a fear of women who didn't perform the household roles that they were prescribed to. Like, no, Ethel, that's not what you're supposed to do in the kitchen. Grunty, you're supposed to clean with that broom, not write on it. Both Grunty and Ethel can also be seen as envious of more traditional feminine traits. Gruntilda wants to steal a prettier face from Tootie the bear, and Ethel wants to steal the experience of motherhood from another woman. And while I don't condone the millennia of witch hunts that resulted in these hocus-pocus stereotypes, it's also just fun to face a villain that's as grotesquely selfish as the fairy tales say. For as simple a premise as hag kidnaps girl, what makes Ethel so great is the range of options the game gives you to interact with her. Within the first act of Baldur's Gate 3, you can either side with her or these travelers accusing her, but you can also buy her potions, steal her potions, or just outright attack her, the latter two options causing her to leave the Emerald Grove early. If you remain cordial, however, you can ask Ethel to remove the parasitic Mind Flayer tadpole as per the game's main quest. Ethel wants one of your eyes in exchange, which will permanently handicap your perception and, amusingly, give you a +1 intimidation just because you look scarier. And it turns out that she can't actually remove the tadpole. But she'll keep the eye anyway, no refunds. That's what you get for making deals with Fae, guys. Alternatively, you can try and kill her, though not only does she escape very quickly, she won't actually stay dead. This is thanks to some magical mushrooms in her lair that are holding her soul, causing her to regenerate wherever she is slain. But she'll certainly remember that you killed her. So later in the story, you can find her disguised as the owner of the Blushing Mermaid, where she's still wheeling, dealing, and little kid stealing. Once again, you can try to attack her, but to keep her down for good, you'll have to find her lair and stomp out her mushrooms. Even then, the fight is complicated. She's got some decently powerful spells, including Hold Person and Hideous Laughter. She can throw incendiary and poisonous slime bombs that she's concocted, plus she's holding any potions that you didn't either buy or steal from her earlier. She likes to multiply herself similar to Kamek, and if she's on the ropes, she'll try to settle the fight by offering you a lock of her hair, which gives a precious stat buff. All of this is including the fact that she might be gestating a hag when you fight her, so you may want to avoid hurting the hostage child. Or maybe you want to make nice with her anyway because as it turns out, she can actually join your alliance for the game's final battle.
Really?
It's a few haggified children between friends, right? Like so much of Baldur's Gate 3, Auntie Ethel allows you to write your own stories around your encounters with her, seeing different sides of her menace depending on your choices. It's a Brothers Grimm fairy tale with Mad Libs blanks, whether you kick her keister or have her join your ranks. I personally killed her because, well, I'm lawful good. But you gotta respect this old witch of the wood.
Yeah, I'd probably kill her too. She's killing kids for crying out loud. Get her!
Arc system works as a double-edged sword for me in these countdowns. They come up with such great character designs
Guilty
that
Gear,
twist
Blaze
or elevate
Blue.
a ton of classic tropes. But trying to explain these characters' backstories is a constant nightmare for me. Well, we're diving in anyway because we have to talk about Eno, the rock and roll witch from Guilty Gear. First of all, awesome design. Does anyone remember the Hex Girls from Scooby-Doo? Yeah, you do. So let's start with her observable witchcraft and then get into the nitty-gritty of this story. Eno is just awesome. Her hat and her outfit immediately sell witch, but her magic comes out through her music, blasting waves of sonic energy, turning her hat into a speaker to amplify her sound, or getting up close and personal to garrote people with her guitar strings. She was a shoo-in for top 10 musician fighters back during my first weapons month. And you might be thinking, wouldn't this make her a bard rather than a witch? Well, maybe in Pathfinder, but in most other systems, music is a universal magic. A ton of traditional magic comes from chants and limericks, double, bubble, toil, and trouble, and all that. And the histories of rock and roll and witchcraft have overlapped plenty of times. Season of the Witch by Donovan, Black Magic Woman by Fleetwood Mac, I Put a Spell on You by Screamin' Jay Hawkins. Dark spellcasters get along great with countercultural art movements, so it makes total sense that practicing one could lead you into the other. In Eno's case, her Duesenberg guitar is standing in as her broom, letting her more or less ignore gravity. This gives Eno some dangerous mix-up potential as she can access all of her aerial moves while still low to the ground. Kinda like Peach in Smash Brothers. Very difficult to master, but more difficult to contend with when harnessed by a professional. Eno even serves as the final boss of a few Guilty Gear story modes for this very reason. So after a few rounds of getting my ass kicked by the cultist, I decide, cool, I want to know more about her. How did she become a witch? Why does she play music? What are her goals and her dreams? And you can never make this easy for me, can you, Arxis?
Sounds about right.
This is what we can gather from her many storylines across the games. Truncated, mind you. I don't want to be here all day. So there was an event in this world called the Crusades. Not the real-world history Crusades, mind you. These Crusades happen in the future with monsters threatening humanity. And during this time, the wishes of the people for a better tomorrow were so strong that it manifested into its own entity, which was put into the body of a girl living in the backyard outside of time and space. But another entity named the Original thought that this being would be too powerful, taking away half her power and her sense of humanity. What was left was Eno, with no past, no future, no memory, and the ability to time travel for some reason. Eno sees a dark future yet to come and makes it her mission to interfere with the timeline enough to divert fate, though she goes about it in a very renegade fashion. She's seemingly incapable of being nice to anyone, and has even more trouble directly communicating her intentions, so usually she shows up messing with other characters, sending them to random places and making them fight each other as part of her convoluted plan only she understands. Mixed with suggestive double entendres because, hey, she worked hard on that outfit and she likes being flirty. She teams up for a time with the anti-villain That Man, yes, his name is That Man, this series fucking hates me, who has his own way of trying to fix the universe, but she never puts all of her eggs in one basket. And once Eno learns about her confusing origin, she lashes out against the Original, That Man, and pretty much anyone else trying to help her. Ino is a being of contradiction.
She just can't trust anyone.
She's trying to save humanity, but she also just kind of hates people, especially any form of organization or chain of command that binds people together. She's an agent of chaos, which is very witchy and very rock and roll. Both of these movements are inherently
rock and roll
defiant,
rich.
popularized by their rudeness and refusal to follow the norm. Of course, both rock and roll and witchcraft can be co-opted by the powers that be. Bands sell out and corporations sell cheap tarot cards, the same way that man seeks to use Ino for her magic. But part of any good rebel's journey is learning that the rage against the machine is just part of the machine, and then you must learn to rage in your own way. Ino gets very discerning with her alliances after this turn, re-examining her rivalry with Axel Low and Soul Bad Guy.
See?
At one point she gives a very good piece of advice to Soul when he's down in the dumps about the people he's hurt. Being afraid of your own power is a waste of time. In Ino's mind, if you have power, you gotta use it. You might make mistakes. You might help the very people who took away your memory. You might recombine with Happy Chaos and become a crazed god that the hero's gotta take down. But that's all part of the learning process. Whether she's a demonic hero or a hexing rebel, this babe with the bass makes a whole lot of trouble. She wastes no time with niceties and less time for doubt. Just gotta keep your eyes on the prize. And I'm sure things will work out.
That's a good way to look at it. Nice. Ino wins. It's for Elden Ring.
Speaking of game lore that is hard to get a straight answer for,
Hi, Dark Souls.
FromSoft. I actually had a few people recommend the Witch of Izalith from Dark Souls, and yeah, she had a commanding presence in her backstory, but what little time you see her in-game, she's the bed of chaos, and fuck the bed of chaos! Dark Souls isn't going to help us out here, but more recently, we met an endearing enchantress in Elden Ring who won the hearts of gamers everywhere. A little witch named Ranni. Born the daughter of Elden Lord Radagon and Queen Rennala, Ranni was upgraded to demigod status when her dad left her mom and married the divine sovereign Queen Marika. This also made Ranni next in line to take Marika's place as the new lead of the sovereign autocracy of the land. But like many witches, Ranni's not a fan of organized religion and doesn't like how the divine will governs everyone's lives. Unfortunately, this would be a hard thing to rebel against. Being named successor made Ranni an Empyrean, making it so that her destiny to rule was magically baked into her flesh. So what did Ranni do? She got rid of her flesh. We see Ranni a lot throughout the game, but the Ranni we see isn't the original Ranni. Instead, her soul is inhabiting a doll, a motif that FromSoft really seems to like. This doll wasn't even made to look like Ranni, but rather her mentor,
not fantasy, everybody.
known only as the Snowy Crone. You can read more about her from the description of these matching costume pieces. So yeah, Ranni's working with two very popular witch motifs here, the first being Cold and Frost. From the Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, which of course inspired Disney's Frozen, to the White Witch from Lewis Carroll's Chronicles of Narnia, ice has always been a great focus for cold-hearted hags. Ranni's other specialization is stars. She's a bit of an astrologian. Apparently when you become an Empyrean, you get your own moon, hers being the dark moon that gives off a cold and lonely aura synergizing with her ice. And her ultimate goal is for the player to help her ascend to the night sky, replacing the tyranny of the Elden Ring with a new age of stars. Now, astrology as a topic can evoke strong feelings in skeptics. Like, sure, it sounds unlikely that everyone born in a 30-day time frame is going to share the same innate qualities, but people who study the zodiac closer find that stars don't actually make people do anything. They more so offer hypotheticals that allow us to self-reflect, shedding light on our foibles and what we actually want out of life. That's the kind of rulership that Ranni envisions, for people to have their freedom led only by a watchful, guiding light. So if you complete Ranni's questline, she'll beckon in this new age, which due to a rather unfaithful translation sounds a lot more sinister in the English version, but really, I think she just doesn't want anyone telling her what to do. Heck, achieving this actually requires that you basically propose to her, giving her a ring and becoming her consort. I mean,
sweet.
I could do worse. So about that whole being dead thing. In my favorite bit of lore, Ranni escaped her Empyrean destiny essentially by exploiting a magical loophole. Ranni steals the Rune of Death, like the very concept of death itself, off the Elden Ring. She breaks half of it off and infuses it into the black knives of some hired assassins, who use them to kill Godwyn the Golden, another demigod. And at the same time, she puts the other half of the death rune into her own body, so that in that same instant, both her and Godwyn half die. Godwin dies in spirit, his body left as a sort of zombie, and Ronnie dies in flesh, escaping her Empyrean vessel and taking refuge in that doll. This also leaves a runic mark over the doll's one eye, with the side effect being that she always looks like she's winking. Okay, I'll admit, that's cute. So far as witch spells go, this has to be one of my all-time favorites, because again, it doesn't work by any written laws of magic. It's not like anyone ever tested what happens if you split the death rune into two bodies. But it works because Ronnie has the idea of what each ingredient represents and a will for how she wants it to manifest. Intention, intention, intention. There are all kinds of other deeper theories that we could argue over, whether or not Renala was her real mother, or if she has any connections to Melina. I mean, their faces are basically mirrors of each other. But what truly matters is this. She forms a coalition, practically a church in its own right, around her beliefs. She casts her magic with metaphor and intention, all with the means to end what she sees as persecution. And she pulls off a big snowy hat like no one else. Though cold is the night, you need not be afraid of this wintry waif and her shadow knight blade. With you by their side, they can finally try to see all peoples free as the stars in the night sky.
Let me know if you actually did that quest. I don't know if I'll ever play Dark Souls, because frankly, I don't think I want that kind of headache. Thank you very much. Just saying, it doesn't seem like my cup of tea. Well, down to the final 3. Shall we? One of these I haven't played yet. Next up.
Anyone else notice a lack of Darkstalkers characters this month? Yeah, that took me by surprise too, but hey, at least we have Morrigan. Just not that Morrigan. I'm talking about Morrigan, the Witch of the Wild from Dragon Age. First encountered in Dragon Age Origins, you'll find Morrigan in the Kokari Wilds while completing your initiation into the Grey Wardens. Or rather, Morrigan will find you. She follows a soon-to-be warden in beast form, sizing them up before revealing herself as a scantily clad, manic, witchy goth girl who immediately wants you to meet their mother, Flemeth, a more ancient and powerful Witch of the Wilds. Admittedly, Flemeth could have also been on this list. She features heavily in the lore of this world, the local tribes respect and fear her, and we never really know how true the legends of her may be. But while Morrigan starts as merely an extension of Flemeth's influence, through her journey with the Warden she can grow and change, while also exhibiting much more of her witchcraft. That's always going to take precedence for me, but suffice it to say, you can't truly understand Morrigan without examining her complicated relationship to her mother. Flemeth has groomed and manipulated Morrigan into the perfect tool for drawing travelers to an untimely death, and all around just doing her bidding. In fact, you later find out that Flemeth's had a number of daughters and has lived so long by continually stealing their bodies. Morrigan clearly resents her mother, but sees no use in trying to escape her. Her sheltered upbringing leaves her with a warped world view where she sees all love and compassion as fleeting, believing that friends and family only exist as a way to take advantage of others. Because of this assumption, she treats others poorly, preventing her from making friends until she inevitably returns to Flemeth's side. Morrigan joins your party at Flemeth's behest. Apparently the fifth blight you're trying to eradicate is just as dangerous to Flemeth as it is to anyone. But while she may be your ally, Morrigan is openly hostile to you at all times. She uses her feminine wiles to get into people's heads, then belittles them for showing the slightest interest in her romantically or platonically. Every conversation with her is either a negotiation or a pissing contest. And I wouldn't blame players for refusing to engage with her. She is insufferable. But it's also easy to see the cycle of abuse that she's caught in. Now, if you've ever wondered why there are so many fictional femme fatales named Morrigan or Morgana or some variation of that moniker, it's because they're referencing the Morrigan, a goddess of Celtic mythology. Depending on what version of the myth you're reading, be it the Ulster cycle or the mythological cycle, the Morrigan could refer to a trio of goddesses central to witchcraft, the reason why so many covens have a mother-maiden crone structure. Or, Morrigan might be one of the witches in this coven, a goddess of war. As an individual, she's perhaps most famous as the antagonist to Cuchulainn. She'd often try to trick him, disguised as a civilian or an animal, flirt with him to try to make a deal, or interfere in his feats of heroism. And she also happens to be rolled into the Arthurian villain Morgan Le Fay. So if you've practiced any kind of spiritual witchcraft, you've heard of her. So it's a big deal for my argument that Dragon Age's Morrigan is so much like the Celtic goddess. Her class specialization is Shapeshifter, able to wild shape into animals, in her case poison-spitting spiders, a swarm of insects, or a big fuck you bear, and she wears all black with a lot of feather motifs, mirroring the Morrigan symbology of crows. And she's an unapologetic temptress, always trying to string men along. Of course, Dragon Age Origins gives you the chance to romance her, and I'd argue that she gets the better side of the stick in any scenario that goes down. Information, influence, material gifts. But what she wants most is that little bit of archdemon power flowing through the veins of every Grey Warden. If you manage to hit it off with her, she'll give you a matching ring that's supposed to let you and her locate each other and read each other's thoughts. But while her ring works perfectly, yours only seems to give you vague notions of what she's thinking. So yeah, it's kinda like if your partner's first gift to you was bugging your phone. The climax here is before the final battle, where normally the Grey Warden would have to sacrifice himself, but Morgan pops up with a possible solution. One that involves her immaculately conceiving your child, transferring your archdemon juice into the little baby, and then running off with it to suit her own needs. It doesn't even have to be your son, in fact. If you say no, she can still do it with Alistair and then pull the archdemon power into the child anyway. She just wants it to be your child. Maybe her own twisted way of being sentimental. So like Kamek, Gruntilda, Ethel, heck, even her own mother Flemeth, Morgan's following the fairy tale witch tradition of hoarding children to perform confusing evil magic with, but somehow this feels the most perverted. I'm reminded of Grendel's mother from Beowulf, or Melisandre from Game of Thrones, witches gaining power through sexual acts with specially ordained heroes. Whether you agree to this or not, Morgan will leave the party, appearing again in the Witch Hunt DLC for one last tete-a-tete. I wanted to focus mainly on Origins here because that's where you spend the most time with her, though she does return as an NPC in Dragon Age Inquisition and is set to play a big role in Veilguard, which evidently has already come out before this list did. Sorry I won't have time to react to Veilguard, but let me highlight her appearance in Inquisition, where I think Morgan goes from a memorable party member to a legitimately fascinating character. At this point, it seems that Morgan has successfully distanced herself from Flemeth, now that she knows that she was meant as Flemeth's next vessel. She's now the arcane advisor to a powerful empress, playing the room and trading a little bit of her knowledge for a lot in return. This also gives us a chance to meet her son, Kieran, the result of that weird ritual that she did back in Origins. So here's the interesting thing. One possible path sees Flemeth capturing Kieran, and Flemeth offering Morgan a deal. Either Morgan gives herself up to become Flemeth's vessel, or Flemeth keeps her son, Kieran. And maybe it's because of the lessons that she learned while traveling with the Grey Warden, or from some stronger motherly instinct, but Morgan decides to sacrifice herself for the life of her son, effectively breaking that cycle of witch parents using their kids. Morgan is unique on this list in that the persecution that she faced was due to another witch. Her intention was always a bit all over the place because while she is great at getting what she wants, she always had to put her needs second to Flemeth's. And sure, Morgan had a coalition, her family, that being her and her very toxic mother, a coalition that she never asked for or wanted. But nowhere in the past 7 entries do we see a witch really struggle to decide who her coalition is with. Morgan first breaking ties with her mother, and then sacrificing herself to the person that she fears the most for her new kinship that she's found within her son. Old Morgan would never have done that for anyone. And it works out for the best because Flemeth is forced to let Morgan go as a result. Apparently, someone of such will and intention can't be forced as Flemeth's new vessel. As Flemeth puts it,
"You were never in danger from me."
Not because Flemeth wouldn't have harmed her, but because Morgan's spirit has become
too
ironclad.
strong.
Flemeth also leaves Morgan with some parting words, that a time of great change is approaching, and when that time comes, don't be afraid to leap. I guess we'll see where this takes Morgan in Veilguard, but with her wild shape ability and everything that she's been through, Morgan's well adapted for change. Her charisma unmatched and her power astounding. Political acumen and influence compounding. A mighty witch straight out of the Wizard of Oz. And a far better mother than her mother ever was.
You know that. You know. Oh, I think this is Bayonetta.
Miss me, baby.
Got it. And essential stuff, you know what's coming.
I bet most of you expected Bayonetta to be number 1. Well, hey, so did I. And while another
Fair.
character just pushed ahead of the witchy races, the Witch of Genesis Bayonetta could very easily tie. But we can't make Bayonetta share the spotlight. She deserves all the attention to herself. Hell, she demands it.
Pretty
in
much.
fact, she was in my thoughts during the whole month's scripting process. She's a certified monster hunter and has a lot in common with Dante, our top 10 demon in gaming. The Bayonetta and Devil May Cry
they were in the death battle
franchises are
together.
practically
So she
siblings
lost,
separated
but,
at
hey,
birth.
what if I could have a
Both
fight?
the brainchild of Hideki Kamiya, but also made for different publishers. Bayonetta's pistol-whipping fighting style was inspired by Dante's, and she's also kind of a half-breed, born to an Umbran witch and a Lumen sage. Originally named Cereza, Bayonetta's birth of light and dark was seen as blasphemy by both communities, and though she was raised among the witches, she was denied training in the magical arts. Still, she found a way to learn witchcraft, excelling in just about every aspect of it. My theory is that the light within her soul acts as a sort of magnetic opposite that draws out more energy for her Umbran magic. We don't see her casting too many spells, not traditionally anyway. She prefers to channel this energy into several weapons, most famously a set of 4 handguns, but also other powerful tools like swords, bows, whips, yo-yos, and so much more. This might distance her from more traditional witches sitting around their cauldrons, but it's not unheard of for witches to take up
day and
arms.
age,
They
gotta
were a
adapt or
highly persecuted
perish.
people. They had to know how to defend themselves, and some were even martial masters, such as Skatha, who trained Cuchulainn to wield a spear. The persecution happens in Cereza's backstory too, not just from the Umbran witches, but to them. Cereza's people were wiped out in a surprise attack from the Lumen Sages in the 1400s, beginning a period called the Witch Hunts that line up chronologically with the real witch hunts in Europe. Cereza was hidden away, becoming one of the only survivors with her best frenemy Jean, and although she's suffering from amnesia when we first meet her, she seems to have really internalized this struggle. Except, rather than letting it get her down, Bayonetta has completely owned every stigma levied against her, for being a witch or anything else. People think witches are a threat to the church? Fine.
There you go.
She's
Boom,
gonna
boom.
make a career out of killing angels, which in this series are more
Monstrous.
biblically accurate than normally depicted. They say witches commune with demons? Well, fine.
There you go.
Bayonetta's
Eat
gonna
my
be
damn
the best
butterfly.
demon wrangler in the world. They say witches are seductive temptresses? Fine. Bayonetta's gonna strut her stuff harder than ever and constantly get naked mid-battle. Now, granted, this isn't just for the sake of getting naked. As per European witch lore, every bit of a witch's body flows with magic, including and especially their hair. This is why Ethel's hair from Baldur's Gate is such a powerful stat item. Bayonetta uses her hair as a spell component to fuel most of her powerful attacks, including summoning giant demons, and to make this easier, she's grown out her hair really, really long. That sexy catsuit she's wearing,
Yeah, that's her hair.
all weaved from her own hair, ensuring that she always has a generous supply. Maybe a bit gross, but a pretty smart allusion to history and culture while still acting as an excuse for Kamiya to put half-naked women on screen. Hey, I'm no prude either, and it does help that Bayonetta seems like the kind of character who would choose to dress, dance, and speak in this manner. Sure, she's a fictional character
that
and
does
writers
sound
are
rough
making
for
her
her.
into a sex icon, but in every moment, Bayonetta has the utmost agency, which has drawn both horny dudes and feminists alike to this character. And it's no surprise that witchcraft is often tied into female empowerment. So much of their history is women being judged, harmed, and marginalized. A lot of modern feminism and modern witchcraft is reclaiming these stigmas and these experiences, which fits Bayonetta to a T. It makes it a little more meaningful that she chooses to summon torture devices to skewer big enemies, given the myriad of ways witches have been tortured throughout history. And
Yep.
while her
Well, like they
coquettishness
say,
is sometimes
drama.
analyzed as her messing with her opponent's heads by flirting, rarely do we actually see her enemies getting hot and bothered mid-fight. I think Bayonetta just dances and flirts because she likes to. It makes her feel good,
sense.
and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that makes it more empowering. So that's intention and persecution accounted for, but what about coalition? Well, Bayonetta can come off as prickly when she gets a new travel companion. She claims to work alone and especially hates children, but every time
we've
without
seen
fail,
that one's
Bayonetta becomes very
false.
protective of her allies. This kid Loki, the suave disaster Luca, her girlfriend Jean, I'm sorry, I mean her best friend that she went to hell to save Orpheus style. Nothing romantic here,
both here.
just gals being pals. There's also Viola, the new generation character that Cereza eventually passes the Bayonetta torch to, and of course, Rodin. These two may claim that they're just upholding their quid pro quos to each other, but there's no way in hell that these two don't enjoy each other's company at least a little bit. But
You won't be
Bayonetta's
surprised.
most impactful relationship turns out to be with herself. In Bayonetta 1, the Bullet Witch comes to realize that this little girl that she's protecting is herself from the past. all at once, this helps restore Bayonetta's memories, has her step into the role of a mother figure, gives her some closure on the loss of her own mother that allows her to open up to others later on, and lets her be the supportive adult that she never had as a kid. It heals her generational trauma a bit, and I think this ties into a very witch-prevalent theme of self-discovery. Like, yeah, Bayonetta 3 in the Multiverse of Madness wasn't how we wanted the saga to end, but there's something about Bayonetta teaming up with different versions and aspects of herself that builds on that simultaneous sense of coalition and self-growth. Central to witchcraft, while it's important to find your sisterhood and depend on them, it's also vital to recognize the bottomless reservoir of power within oneself. And I'd say that's the biggest through line for Bayonetta as a character. She never lacks self-confidence, but this self-understanding only makes her more powerful with each successive game. So while these games at first might seem quite problematic, my love for its themes are true and emphatic. This 8-foot-tall champion, narratively rich, says to love yourself, and don't fuck with a witch.
Yeah, definitely never fuck with that witch. And number 1?
There is no witch in any video game ever released that can hold a lavender-scented candle to Bayonetta. But there is one in early access. 2020's Hades by Supergiant Games was such a complete package. A mechanically deep and story-rich roguelike that ties every bit of its being to Greek mythology. I expected more of the same from Hades 2. Heck, I hoped for it. What more could I ask for? But I never would have guessed that the sequel would drop Zagreus as a protagonist in favor of a witch who ties every bit of her ability set into witchcraft. Despite being firmly set in the Greek pantheon, Hades 2 incorporates a more modern take on witchcraft, which, in turn, covers a wide breadth of witchcraft across a variety of ancient civilizations. So let's jump into our number 1.
Here we go.
Let's talk about the chthonic nymph Melinoë. To start, it's worth noting that Melinoë is already a figure in Greek myth. One I'd say was better known before this game came out than Zagreus was before Hades 1. She has an awful lot of stories about her, mainly having a dominion over nightmares and madness, and being the daughter of Persephone, though many stories claim her father was actually Zeus disguised as Persephone's husband Hades. God damn it, Zeus. Well, in this game's lore, she's the rightful daughter of Hades and Persephone, younger sister of Zagreus, and princess of the underworld. Then everything changed when the Titan Kronos attacked. Hades sent a young Melinoë away to be raised and trained in secret by Hecate, and dude, you could not ask for a better witch mentor. You know the thing I said about the Morgan that was the inspiration for the mother, maiden, crone archetypes? Well, I kind of lied. Hecate is way older, worshipped as a goddess of witchcraft, magic, and necromancy as early as the 1600s BC, and rolled into Greek mythology when her stories were brought over, most likely from Asia Minor. Archaeologists have found cult altars to her in Greece, Turkey, and even Sicily, many depicting her as a tri-bodied deity, mother, maiden, crone, and she remains an inspirational figure for aspiring witches to this day. The Hecate we see in Hades 2 was a tempting inclusion for this list as well, wearing a lot of post-Renaissance witch swag like that big pointy hat. Though since she is a supporting character in this game, I ultimately decided to go with the pro tag. Luckily, when we pick up the game, Melinoë's already grown up and received a collegiate level of magic lessons from her coven, the Silver Sisters. Acting as a special ops group for Nyx, the goddess of night, this coven also includes Selene, the incarnation of the moon, and Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Which is fitting considering that sources often conflate these two with Hecate, some even saying that they're her other two bodies. And obviously the moon is also a vital part of witchcraft. And outside of this core group, Melinoë's also getting help from Circe, the enchantress who famously turned Odysseus' crewmen into pigs, and Medea, the sorceress who helped Jason find the Golden Fleece and took venomous revenge when he divorced her. Quite the who's who of Greek mythology witches. But enough about who trained her. What kind of witchcraft does Melinoë actually do? Would you believe me if I said everything?
Really?
Unlike her brother Zagreus, Melinoë's menagerie of weapons tend to be smaller and more arcane. This includes a witch's staff, a pair of sacrificial daggers, a combination scepter/torch, torches being another symbol of Hecate, and a magic skull that gives me vibes of Louisiana voodoo magic. The only two outliers are the Moonstone Axe, which is, yes, a huge-ass axe, and the Black Coat, which basically serves as mystical power armor complete with rockets and force fields.
Yeah,
but like I said with Bayonetta, sometimes a witch has to be practical and go for the heavier weapons or ballistic armaments. In addition to these nocturnal arms, Millenoway has mana to cast actual spells in combat, one of her go-tos being a straight-up spellbinding circle. Real ones know, that's some forbidden magic right there. Replacing Zagreus' Mirror of Night, Millenoway enhances her abilities with arcane cards, i.e. tarot cards. Have I really not talked about tarot yet outside of a few passing mentions? Originally regular playing cards in Italy, the tarot came to be used by fortune tellers using the inherent narrative symbolism of the cards, particularly Romani people who had immigrated to the area, and nowadays tarot is synonymous with metaphysical divination. Great
or
way
if
for
you know
Millenoway
Persona,
to
you know where that goes.
Improvement. As for home improvement, Millenoway can make things in her cauldron. At first I saw all these materials and thought, oh, just what we need, another crafting mechanic in video games. But bringing it full circle with Witchwood, finding your ingredients and putting them together with intention is what witchcraft is all about. Millenoway is making life better for everyone around her. She's a real emphatic soul that often takes people aback by how kind she is despite her singular purpose to kill a titan. This might be why animals around the crossroads naturally follow her, and holy Hera, is this the first time I'm mentioning familiars? Grunty does have her dog broom and later a cat companion, but that feels different. Morgan and Bayonetta prefer to turn into animals. And Ronnie, well, I think you're her pet. Yeah, Millenoway is the first on this list to recruit small animal-looking spirits to help her. How about that? Yeah. All of this is to say that I knew Millenoway was going to be my number one when I realized that I had too much to talk about. I'd love to get into the story of her missing arm that reminds me of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, how her openness about her body parallels other women's reclamation movements despite taking Odysseus seriously off guard, how there's a whole field of color magic where practitioners choose what color witch they want to be, and Millenoway fits all 9 colors. She seriously does it all. Spellcasting, incantations, martial aptitude, divination, conjuration, spiritual growth,
the ultimate witch.
Guidance, divine communion, gardening, crafting, decorating, forging relationships, crystalism, and fishing. Look, in this day and age of gaming, you gotta have a fishing mechanic in there somewhere. And all of this from a game that technically isn't even finished yet. Who knows what greater magics Millenoway has yet to learn? Bayonetta has taken down angels and gods, but Millenoway's besting a titan, parents of gods, and saving gods who are unable or unwilling to do something themselves. She's used the incarceration of her family and the support of her fellow witches to become a bona fide patriarch-busting bamf. She's powerful, resourceful, beautiful, and... do I have a crush on her?
I think you do.
God damn it, not again! Well, I suppose a witch who communes with the likes of Aphrodite is bound to charm at least a few hearts out there. I'm not even mad. Even if Hades 2 released tomorrow with absolutely nothing else added, I'm still declaring Millenoway as my number one witch in video games. Just gotta give us a better closure than Bayonetta 3. Not a high bar, honestly. I'm Green Scorpion, and I want to give a humble thank you to everyone who stuck with me through Monster Month 2. It was a huge endeavor, tricky to pull off, but a treat to deliver. And I'm glad you were all here to witness it.
No worries.
Enjoy the rest of your winter months, my friends.
Happy holidays.
Never stop growing, because the journey of self-improvement never ends. Be proud, hold fast, and stand tall. And may the sun, moon, and stars bless you all. So mote it be.
Happy holidays indeed. Man, now we really gotta play that game. Anytime I see these, like, top 10s, they're always like, I gotta check that out. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. See ya.